Yo,
Jamal,
what's up?
can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I'm
Epic,
good.
epic,
Yeah,
awesome.
good
Um,
to see you.
First of all, how's your back?
It's doing much better. Yeah, I just surfed. I got into the chiropractor and yeah, she fixed me up. It's like a thing that happens, like twice a year. While just like my rib will slip out and get a bad spasm, and then, but if I get like treated quickly, it's all good. And surfing actually is pretty. It's just like lift. I was trying to be too like much, do everything myself, move too much furniture. But yeah, it's good. We just got good waves this morning. It's like first big swell of the season, so I'm psyched.
So you're in California right now.
Right now I'm in California. Yeah, yeah, I'm in the house. We kept a house here that we're renting out, um and just like clearing it out for a new renter. But yeah, so stoked to get away, and
Yeah,
hit
yeah,
the
I did.
start of the
I
fall.
saw that
It's like,
little picture you posted on Instagram. That looked like a sick spot.
yeah, that was down in Montara. That was like, yeah, that's a cool, just like 20 minutes south of San Francisco, almost a Half Moon Bay, little like, um, yeah, more clear water and stuff down there. But I'm just psyched to like get in the water. Although I was like, it's funny to leave like right as it starts cranking on the East Coast, but we've been getting good waves here. It's fine. I'm happy just staying wet.
Incredible. Well, should we get started?
Yeah, yeah, sounds
Excellent.
good.
Um,
Um,
um, Hello, welcome to Speaking from Water. I am your host, Sean Ruttkay. This is the only podcast that delivers water legends to you so you can become inspired in the water. And today we have a major legend himself, Jaimal Yogis. And Jaimal is an incredible surfer. He is a world traveler, a best-selling author. Some of his major books, Saltwater Buddha, The Fear Project, All of Our Waves Are Water, which I just finished, and absolutely incredible. I want to get a lot into that, and a slew of children's books, Mop Rides Waves of Change, Mop Rides Waves of Life, City of Dragons series, and a new book, The Adventures of Drip and Drop. Jaimal, welcome. It is an honor to have you. Thank you for taking the time and joining us today.
yeah, thanks, Sean. It's stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Uh, like I was saying, the life that you've lived is incredible. You've traveled the world. I want to get into your travels, into your history. Something that really resonated, though, I want to jump right into the deep end with you, is this concept of dream yoga, and a and really what struck me so much about the dream yoga is that, like, personally, when I'm dreaming and I'm lucky enough to enter a scene of beach in my dream. Personally, I can never surf in my dream. I don't know what it is. Maybe one or two times in my life, I'm actually like riding a wave, and those times I vividly remember being epic. But this concept of dream yoga, can you tell us what it is, how to achieve this state, and a little bit about that?
Cool. I'm glad you like that part. Yeah, it's kind of a little known aspect of both um, uh, Tibetan Buddhism and Taoism practice, dream yoga. And it's basically the art of being conscious in your dreams. So there's an idea that it's one thing to be able to meditate and stay aware and mindful throughout your day, but there's 8 hours when you're sleeping, and if you can bring awareness into that space of sleep, that you can actually sort of supercharge your practice and your awareness. And there's even in Tibet, like the Tibetans believe that your consciousness travels throughout many lives, and in dream you sort of there's a corollary where you don't have a body, but you sort of, your mind creates this whole universe, you know. And so dreams are amazing, right? You feel like you have a body. You could be surfing and feel like you're surfing. You could be eating and tasting food, and that all is coming from the power of your own consciousness. And you feel like you have a body. So the Tibetans actually say this is what it's like in the in-between states, between lives. And that if you can practice awareness in your dream, that it helps you navigate the time, the period between lives. Now that's way beyond sort of my experience or being but I I got into this because as a kid, I had these dreams naturally where I would just know I was dreaming in a dream, and I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna go fly, I'm gonna go, or it would happen to me in nightmares. I'd be like running from the monster, and then I'd be like, oh wait, I'm dreaming, and I could like transform the dream. And so when I heard this was like a thing that Tibetan yogis do, I wanted to learn it. And there's basically, I mean, it's an advanced practice. People say, you know, it's not like something where you go into a meditation class and they're going to start with dream yoga. But for some people, they have sort of, they naturally remember a lot of dreams, and it can be like a pretty cool space. And the idea is if you can then like do your yoga practice in your dream, like a lot of the more subtle energies that yogis are trying to feel, like chakras opening up and stuff, are more accessible to you. And because you're not like, you're relaxed in your sleep and you're not like as blocked up. And I have had some dreams where I like remembered like, oh, I should do my meditation. And it's true, it is an interesting feeling. Usually I'm more like, when I realize I'm dreaming, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go do something fun. And so yeah, it's a really cool practice though. I recommend, there's the Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep, is a really cool book if you're interested in. There's a Stanford neuroscientist, Stephen LaBerge, who also studied it and written about it extensively from the scientific view. So yeah, I have, it's funny, my surf dreams, I'm often like trying to get to the surf and I can't for some reason. Like it's like epic and my buddy's running out and I'm like, oh, my board's dinged up now, or it's like something. So I feel like that's like my going to school naked dream or something. Like almost getting to the waves, but can't. I think that one's happened more since being a dad. Yeah.
I can completely relate, and I'm sure lots of people listening can also relate to that experience. You're a father of three. You've again are a super successful author, but prior to this fame, I will call it, you were a globe trotting traveler, and you traveled the world. And before you even did that, I'm kind of giving your bio here, but your parents were your dad was in the military, as I understand, and you kind of were rebellious. Can you kind of, I know a lot of kids can kind of relate to that stage in life. Can you kind of tell us how that formed you into the person that left to go off on your journey?
Yeah, so my dad was in the Air Force. We were stationed in the Azores, Portugal, when I was like 3 to 6, basically. And so we lived on the beach, and my dad had been a surfer, like, you know, not hardcore, but he was stationed in Hawaii in the Navy and stuff. He grew up on the East in New York surfing. And so he had kind of passed his surfing by the time he was a dad, but he loved to body surf. So we did a lot of that in the Azores. And I loved it there on the island. And then we got stationed in Sacramento and whatever, grew up in Sacramento, suburbs, you know, typical kind of anywhere America place. And I grew up skating and snowboarding some because we were fairly close to the Sierras. But I always wanted to surf, and I started getting, you know, it's like my crew of friends were getting into lots of like typical teenage trouble. Like I'd gotten a DUI, I got suspended from school. It wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't like failing out of school or anything, but I seemed to be the one to get caught a lot. and anyway, I felt like my life was caving in because I was like, I was on probation at one point. I was like, so I thought I just need to change things. I started actually going back to dreams. I started having these dreams of waves and islands, and like it kept coming back. And I long story short, bought a one-way ticket to Maui junior year of high school, left a note on my pillow, was like, I didn't tell my parents where I was going. I just said I'm somewhere in the world, and went to Maui to learn to surf. I had like a few $100. It was really tough to figure it out. I was, and Saltwater Buddha, my first book, is like, this is sort of the kickoff, is like landing in Maui and being like, oh crap, I don't know, what am I going to eat? How am I going to survive and also learn to surf? And so that journey, I only lasted a few weeks in Maui before my dad came over and like brought me back. But it kicked off a journey of like then chasing waves for the next 20 plus years, and also learning meditation, though, because it was so difficult being in Maui, and it was jarring arriving as a teenager and suddenly being like, oh man, I'm on my own. I knew I needed something, and my parents had introduced me to some meditation as a kid, but I didn't want to do it. I was like, oh, that's their thing. But when I was suddenly like jarred into this tough environment, I thought I need something. So I started trying. And I think because I was getting beat up by the North Shore of Maui, and I was getting beat up by my own mind, like I instantly made this connection, like between learning to surf and learning to meditate. And so I got into both deeply, both, like I later lived in a Buddhist monastery, and I also, was surfing a lot. And so I think the nature of my books, though I never planned to like make that a thing that I wrote about. Later, I became a journalist, and sort of when I realized that these two had really, surfing and meditation had really been the anchors that like kept me sane and happy, and they and surfing was a metaphor, for the waves of the mind. So that's sort of where a lot of those books, grew, how those books came to be.
And when was it that you said to yourself, oh, I now understand meditation. I know how to get to that place. Because so many people say, oh, it's so boring. And, I've tried it before. I've tried to talk to my friends about starting it up. And a surfer friend of mine was like, man, we already do that. We go surfing, and looking at the horizon is a meditation. So can you kind of enlighten us as to how surfing is relatable to meditation, and maybe how the meditation is accessible outside of surfing? And how do you,
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, your friend is right. I think it's really true, when you're waiting for waves, and when you're riding them, meditation, a lot of people think it has to be still and you have to be like in like, lotus posture and stuff. But really, meditation is, we're always meditating. Meditating is just the act of reflecting on something. And when you meditate, do still meditation, you're using your breath as an anchor for your mind to focus, because so often we're lost in stories and thoughts, and those stories and thoughts can be positive, or they can be a lot of worries and negativity, or like, what if, and that cause us unnecessary suffering. So the idea of being able to use your breath as an anchor to really slow your thoughts down, so you almost get like the space between, like a glassy long period swell, where you can actually see like, oh, I'm watching my thoughts go by now. And that's really like there's nothing magical about just being still and sitting there. If it's not your thing, you don't have to do it. But the idea is, can you be aware of what's going on in your mind? Because, like Bruce Lee said, watch your thoughts, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become, your reality. That wasn't not a direct quote, but something like that. And so when you're out there, yeah, there's a lot of time looking at the horizon where you can breathe, and it's like you're part of nature, and you feel kind of you're in that zone, and also you're in a flow state of, when you're surfing a lot, especially when the waves are good and you're able to surf. It's like you get into a very present state, and that is what you're actually going for in meditation too. It's just like the ancient yogis, they were wandering around India and like looking for ways to end suffering, to be happy. And they found these postures and things that they developed into a science of the mind, to be like, here's some ways to be more content, to live more present. And surfing, I think, is just one of those. Like, it wasn't happening in India, 2,500 years ago, but I think if it was, like, one of those gurus would have been like, and there's also this, this great method, surfing, which gets you into a present state. And obviously, just like meditation can become like an ego trip, and you get these yogis who are like, whatever, become crazy guys who abuse their power. It's like you can do the same thing with surfing, right? Like, surfing is this wonderful thing that makes us feel good, it makes us feel happy, but you can be like an aggro jerk and super tense when you're out there waiting for waves, and frustrated and fighting and all those things. So it's like what you bring to different activities. I think, like, if your goal is like, I'm gonna surf to become like a happier, more aware, more healthy person, and also like push myself to be more to my potential physically and stuff. Like, I think that can become your meditation 100%. And I think that's true of anything. Now, there are some things I think about going into like a long, still retreat, and some places that you can get sort of where your mind is in a different state. If you're interested in that, then you can get that you can't. I haven't been able to access surfing, because surfing is way more active. But there's states of mind that I can access surfing that I can't in still meditation. So it's just a different activity, but I think they're both very like roads to a similar kind of to learning different types of awareness, I guess you could say.
You're a swimmer, right? You swim laps.
I mean, I wouldn't call myself a swimmer. Like, I do it when I can't surf. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like, I'm looking to go swim, but like, I do it to stay in shape. And when I do it, I enjoy it. Yeah.
And is that a place where one can find a type of meditation themselves? So when you go swimming for your exercise, is that, say, maybe a more mindful activity than an elliptical machine, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, for me it is, because I think you're I mean, my buddy Jay, who you met, I think at UNC Wilmington, Wallace J. Nichols, talks about the science of blue mind, of being around water. It instantly lowers like our blood pressure. We get into and when you're swimming, you're also rhythmic breathing, so you have this awareness of your breathing. You have kind of sense deprivation too. Like, when you're at the gym and you're like, there's like 3 TVs on, and like, you got your Walkman, and like, it's a lot of distractions. And those distractions can be helpful when you're like, oh, this is really painful, and like, I don't want to focus on the pain, so I'm going to focus on something else. And that's fine. It can be a good stress release, a good way to sweat it out. But I think, yeah, for me, swimming is more like akin to moving meditation, because yeah, you're like rhythmic breathing, you don't have any distractions, you're just looking at this kind of blank wall, similar to like zazen practice. And yeah, it can be very meditative, swimming. I think
What
it's
is
a great.
this zazen you speak of? Can you elaborate on that?
A zazen is like this act of sitting in Zen. So they call it like Zen actually means meditation in Japanese. Dhyana is the translation of dhyana, Sanskrit word dhyana, which basically means to focus. And but it's not a single pointed focus. It's sort of an expansive focus. And in zazen, you would often, in Japan, you'd sit and stare at a white wall, like eyes, a little bit maybe half open. But the idea of the sort of blank canvas is sort of similar to like staring at the bottom of a pool. I often think of that.
So I want to bring it to your book. Excuse me, All the Waves Are Water. And in that book, a piece that really stuck out to me was this concept of dukkha. Did I pronounce that right?
Dukkha.
Yes, dukkha. And can you kind of break that down for us real quick? And then my follow-up to that, and why it kind of resonated, was in these times of social media, we see all of our friends, getting barreled, shredding all over the place. Maybe we can't get there. Maybe sometimes we're the ones posting about this, and we're super hyped and stoked. We wake up the next day and we're not super hyped and stoked anymore because that wave is gone. Kind of relate how we can be in this time of FOMO and seeing what's happening around us in this concept of dukkha.
Yeah, it's a great question. So dukkha is a Sanskrit word, or a Pali word in Buddhism, that is really like it means sort of the dissatisfactoriness that we find in like just the human realm, which is that our minds are always wanting a little something different. So, even when things are like really groovy, it's like whatever, the waves are great, and you still got to get out and go to work, or like, and you're like, oh, I wish I could stay a little longer, or like it looks perfect, but you didn't get the barrel that your buddy got, or like the mind's always kind of like, this is not quite right. And then there's also just like the actual suffering of being alive, where you're old age, sickness, and death. Like, even if you're a movie star, you gotta get old, and you have aches and pains and all those things. So it's like dukkha is sort of this all-encompassing word for like, life's tough. But the mind, the way that our minds work, makes it even tougher, because we're never happy just as with things as they are. We're not good at accepting like the present as is. And the Buddha's point was like, if you can kind of radically accept that like this right now is what it is, and like stop craving for it to be different, there's a serenity and like a freedom and a joy that kind of comes. Now, so in this era, I think social media supercharges all of that craving stuff, because it triggers. It's like we're very rarely like, oh, I'm just here even when we have alone time, we're not alone, because we're on our phones and we're like, what's everybody doing? And so there's very little time where you're just like, oh, checking in with yourself, letting yourself breathe, enjoying a sunset, enjoying, it's like you're always like, oh, the waves are perfect, who am I going to text? And like, and some aspects of that I think are really fun. Like, it can be great to be like, I just got this amazing wave and I want to share it, and you get a lot of joy from that. But it can also like make us really restless. And I don't think it's so different than pre-social media, and that humans are in this state where we want things to be a little bit different, and we're just sort of, and yes, that desire to be a little bit different is also our ambition, and like, well, you want to work harder to like make things better and make your home perfect and all of that. But I think the point is, there's always like to watch, like so many people get those things, get everything they want, and they're still kind of unhappy or restless. And so Buddhist meditation and so many other, philosophies and yogas are about this, are really about like, hey, just watch that underlying drive to not accept things as they are, and not even really be willing to feel things as they are, because oftentimes we're like, I think our world of distraction is sort of built in order for us not to feel, because we're afraid of like sometimes the traumatic feelings that might arise if we let our minds be quiet for a minute. Because sometimes, a lot of us have had rough stuff that we don't want to deal with, and like, so I think that we're in the age of distraction, of like hype uber distraction. And I think with surf, I mean, I am fully like one of these people who's also experiencing FOMO and like has lots of worries and stuff. So even though I've been doing all this stuff for years, I'm right there with everybody else. We live inland right now, which I'm always like checking the swells and bitter about, the fact when I have to miss them. But I think like all these techniques of like stepping back and watching my thoughts and realizing that I'm sort of like making things worse, are helpful to at least take the edge off a little bit, so I'm not like, drowning myself in liquor or something to like heal the pain.
In your many travels, one of the places you went to were the Himalayas, I believe.
Yeah.
And your book, you go into you find a guru, and every day he's just, even when things are bad, he's saying, I'm so happy, I'm so happy. And for a while you're like, is he really happy? But you find that he's genuinely happy. How is it that that we can kind of take that mindset into our own lives, and what is it, aside from just saying we are when we really aren't, that we can authentically feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes there is this idea floating around that like happiness is a choice, and you can just sort of positive your way through all the, when you're feeling down. And I think there's something to that, where it can be helpful, where you can sort of catch yourself just like focusing on the negative or being too down, and being like, no man, just like switch it off. I'm gonna be positive, I'm gonna like fake it till I make it kind of thing. I think that's a little bit it has sort of limited returns in for the long term, because I think Sonam was genuinely happy in the face of, yearning for his family who he lost in Tibet, and so many actual big emotions, because he had done a lot of work on his own mind and heart. And in these Tibetan monks, I mean, this is one of my professors used to call them, they're great vacationers. Like they don't get caught in the rat race to work and make money, and they just do the work to get to know their own minds and hearts, and really find like a lifestyle that's more free. And I think that he had done, spent the better part of his life doing that work, and he had found a kind of more expansive freedom, where yes, there were these big waves of emotions coming through, but he was able to feel them and not sort of run away from them. Like I liken it to, if your mind is the whole ocean, because you've expanded it, even like the big storms, aren't gonna rattle you too much. You're like, that's just coming through. But if you're sort of this really shut down kind of where you're taking everything really personal, that and you have a very hardened like ego, where you're attached to sort of like, this is mine, and that's a sort of a smaller pond, I think, for a mind. And so those bigger waves either get, I think, are more rattling. And so that's that's my guess. It's like Sonam was a unique being. Sometimes you run into people, and he was on a rare occasion who just they've found a way of being, that is contagious, and you feel happy being around them, and you just sort of try to learn from those people what you can. But at the end of the day, I'm just, I'm theorizing. I just enjoyed being with them.
Would you say that the core of that accessible feeling is the thought that we are perishable, we are going to die, maybe at least I'm not dead right now? Is that where this lies? I think to my own life.
That joy, I think, accepting impermanence. I think there is an aspect of that, of like, hey, of letting go of attachment. I think that for me, as a just my own experience, I think happiness comes from stepping into freedom and really following like the things that bring us joy, and making space for those, because I think it's one thing. The tough thing about Buddhism is like there's Buddhist monks like Sonam, who their lifestyle is so different from the workaday lifestyle that you and me live. So I think when you meet someone like that, who's like their consciousness is sort of in a different place, I think you can learn from them, but it's also almost like they've structured their life so differently that it's almost hard to compare, like, what should I be doing to attain that same happiness? And it's like, well, maybe I don't have time to go meditate on a mountain for 20 years and like get like these incredible bliss, like samadhi states right now. But like I can sort of, commit to doing those things that make my life a little more expansive and free. And surfing for me is like, that's the ultimate thing, that if I make time to get in the water every day, and my life is happier, is more free. And then if on top of that I can like create more time for to be healthy and like sleep well and all those things, live a balanced life, and also be aware that I'm not like always racing for more. Like I'm trying to enjoy, be grateful for the things that I have. I think that's sort of like the way that like those little adjustments for us, like who aren't like going to go be hermits on the mountain right now, are the ways to happiness. It's like more flow. We're happy when we're in our own flow.
Can you speak a little bit about authenticity and how taking the path of authenticity in your life kind of brought you to where you are today? And could you give us a little story on a crossroads at this place?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think one of our actually things that makes us unhappy is putting up a mask, and feeling like we should be fitting in to like a role that is expected for us, and fear that we won't be accepted if we sort of are vulnerable and reveal like what we really think or what we really believe or what we really feel. And a metaphor for me with this was like when I was, I'd run away from home to surf, and then I'd like wandered around, went to the University of Hawaii, lived in a Buddhist monastery. And then at some point, I remember I was dating this girl who was much more responsible than me. And I was like, God, if I'm going to really make this work, like I got to get like a real job, and, I gotta be able to like impress her parents and stuff. So I remember feeling like I really needed to go out and do that. And I went to, and it wasn't the only reason that I went to like Columbia journalism school and stuff. But I felt like I needed to like go get a job and like do the world. And doing that for a while, I got a good magazine writing job. I was doing really well. And then I remember like at some point I decided I was going to write an article about how surfing is a meditation for me. And it felt very like risky to do, because I was trying to be like a very, buttoned up kind of political journalist. And of course, like I wrote that article for this little magazine, and it went viral. And at least for by that time, it got like republished in different places and stuff. And I remember being like really worried that like the world was gonna sort of judge me for it. And then a publisher asked me to write a book about it. And at first I was like, no. I was like 26 and I didn't want to be a guru at all. I was like, I'm still figuring this out. But yeah, I eventually I thought, well, maybe I should go back to them and say, maybe I could just sort of tell my story, like write a memoir. And so I did that. And it was so scary, I think, when I finished the book, even though I felt like I'd done a decent job, I was so scared about just how it would be received. And so I eventually, I remember I said I wouldn't. I told the publisher, I'm like, this isn't gonna work. I'm gonna give you guys back the money. And so I was gonna do that, and then it was I sort of reflected on it for a while, and time passed, and I decided to come out with it. But I really battled that feeling of fear. And when I did finally go on book tour, and I really opened up, it's like, hey, this is my story, this is me. It was really freeing. It was really freeing to I guess just be seen, not and realize that I wasn't alone. There were so many people that related and were like, oh, I have a similar story, maybe from a different perspective or different culture. Maybe it's not Buddhism, maybe it's this or that. But that was so liberating, because I realized I always felt like I was sort of alone and an outsider. And I realized that I just wasn't I wasn't connecting with that other people who in a way that was open, and also like a book allows you to go and share your story and meet lots of other people, like a podcast. But I think it taught me a good lesson, which one that I'm still learning, which is to just try to be yourself, and I think because there are lots of other people out there who feel exactly the same way you do.
In all the waves or water, you go to Puerto Escondido for a period of months, and you on the same topic of authenticity, you hang out with a smoothie owner who's very egocentric. He might be one of the best surfers around, but you talk about how when he doesn't make a wave, he's angry, and we all know the guy out in the water who, for no good reason, he's upset about some move he didn't complete. Then you contrast that with the guy, the tattooed man, who is out the back, dropping in early on the perfect single fin, getting just shacked, coming out every time. And how, what really resonated with me is kind of how I and a lot of people, I'm sure, have been in both of those mindsets in the ocean, and how you definitely, looking outside in, want to be like the guru surfer who's out the back and not really caring about what other people think of his move or anything like that. With, again, back to the social media in today's times, how can we be in the water as surfers in a state of bliss? Like, if we find ourselves going down the path of, oh, I'm angry I didn't complete that, or such.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it's not about style of surfing. Like, I think you can be a longboarder and be walking to the nose and looking graceful, but if you're like, you can be probably freaking out inside, or you could be like, doing busting big alley oops and be totally blissed out. I think it's what you bring to it. And again, it's like, I think that you know how we this idea, all our waves are water, by the way, came out of this notion that you know everything is connected. Like, no wave exists separate from the ocean, right? And you and humans are similar in that we feel like we're very like separate from nature or separate from each other, but actually, even on like a sort of physics level, like, that's not true, right? Like, atoms, molecules coming and going all the time. So what makes us, we are totally interdependent. There is like a flow of energy that is like, that includes us. And the more that we can drop into that, I think the more we're like flexible we are a little bit with our egos, because ego is essentially an illusion, and how much you sort of attach to that illusion and are like, I've got to be the best, I have to show everybody, I need this kind of feedback for my to feel okay. It's like that you're a little bit like locking yourself out from the natural flow of reality. And so I think people who are less naturally less egocentric maybe have like a sort of already a feeling for this, like, and they tend to be, I think, happier people. We all, and we've all been that person too, who's like, I mean, I want love, I want everybody to clap for me. I wish I was like busting the big air. But I think, again, it's about like aware, like, if we watch ourselves, if we're able to like take a step back from our own narrative and be like, oh, this is kind of silly, because like I'm out here surfing, I'm not at work, and I'm getting super angry that like, whatever, I didn't get as many waves as I want, or my cutback isn't good, or whatever, and kind of laugh at ourselves. I think that's the road to bliss, is like, but it takes that brief moment of mindfulness where you're like, oh, look, let me observe myself, let me take a breath, and let this wave pass. And sometimes you can't like wiggle out of the emotion right away, because you're like, emotions are sticky, right? And they don't just pass the instant you notice them, but you can sort of not let them control you. So like, when things get heated in the water or whatever, you have an interaction with some guy who's mad, or you're not getting the waves you want, I think it's like just that moment of awareness where you can separate from your own narrative and be like, I'm not going to let this like guide my actions right now. I'm just going to realize that I'm stuck in a wave, like I use that, my kids' books, it's like, when you're getting held down by the wave, it's like, you got to relax, let it pass. And that's similar with emotions, So I think, I think I feel the same way. Like, I've been that smoothie guy who was sort of like, where I feel like I'm ripping and like I kind of have a chip on my shoulder and want to like, sort of dismiss the guys that are learning, or be, but I think I've also been, closer to the guy who's just like happy, and grateful for the rides I'm getting, and just like, that's what I think it's about, is like, whenever you can take a step back and be like, look where I am. I'm in the ocean, look at little, I use little tricks, like where I just try to appreciate like the movements of water, like, the light on water, like looking at the cliffs, or whatever, like little things you have to sort of pop you out of because we're very tribal, and we get caught in these sort of animal instincts where we start wanting to be like the alpha on the peak. And like, I think those things, those old tribal instincts where it's like we need recognition and we need to like set a pecking order and stuff, I think those keep us from like the more expansive mindsets that states that surfing can bring.
You mentioned light on water, and that is what I chase in my own life. I'd like for you to kind of talk a little bit about light on water in your elegant way you do, and is that what it is that is so beautiful when we enjoy water, and how can we find that anywhere, I suppose, maybe even in a glass of water?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think photography is a great way to access. I know you take a lot of beautiful photos, and I remember when I was studying photography, it's like you just become more aware of light, and it shifts your perspective, much like I think a painter or something, where you're just suddenly appreciating the subtle nuances of nature. And I think there's a lot there to unpack. I mean, just on a scientific level, I know that one of the reasons that nature is so relaxing to us is because those structures that nature brings, like the way the ripples are on the ocean, or the way a river moves, or the way the trees are, like, it's infinitely complex. Like, you don't really mimic that in urban architecture. And like, we live in these houses that are all hard corners and kind of simple lines, and those nature places, they kind of access, when you put people in an fMRI, they turn on different parts of the brain that we don't, that are outside of sort of our prefrontal cortex planning. And so it's literally like we're getting kind of a brain massage, and I think there's a lot there. And for whether you're in any kind of nature, but I think the light on, water is where we come from. It's life itself as we know it, and it is just, when we're out there in the waves, we're getting like this, such a unique, special cocktail of things, because we're getting like this adrenaline that brings us into like these kind of a flow state. We're getting the exercise that, brings dopamine and health. And then we're also getting like these, this kind of like spectacular show for our minds, where if we can appreciate it, I think it's something really special. And it's interesting, Sean, because like, I feel like we all start to take it for granted. You live like right on Wrightsville Beach, and like, you just start to take all those things for granted, and you stop forgetting to like take that step back and appreciate. And I think it all comes down to appreciation. And I think it's like light on water can be that access point where it's like, it's just so cool to, but yeah, I'm a big fan of like photography and painting and the arts, because I think they do like open up your seeing, so that you come to, it's not just a skateboard ramp, where you're like, oh, what can I do on it? That's fun too. Like, I love skating and I love seeing what I can do on a wave, but it's like there's also this kind of, you know, saltwater poetry going on constantly around you, and being able to appreciate that, I think, is sometimes, you know, it's like I've moved away from the ocean, and I actually think it's a blessing for a period, because you do it, just the way our minds work, we take things for granted, and sometimes we need to like break it up to be like, oh yeah, that is really special.
You're currently your home base right now is Washington D.C. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, just outside. Yeah.
Yep, and I can, on the same note, I can totally relate. I'm a DC native. I moved here to Wilmington, Wrightsville Beach in 1999, and that was a being in DC. There's a lot of positive things. You're in the center of power. The amount of different people from all over the world are there, but there is no ocean. You have the Potomac, and the I take that time period, and when I maybe am feeling a little, I guess, not stoked here, maybe the waves aren't always great or whatever. I just think back to my younger self, and I'm like, dude, you used to meditate on Rock Creek Park, like dreaming of the ocean. So it's like you got to kind of, you know, oscillate between these thoughts stuff to find joy, like you're saying. I want to ask you about these three different waves that you've spent a lot of time enjoying, and they're Mavericks, Puerto Escondido, and Indonesia. I don't know what break it was, but you spent a lot of time in Indonesia. Can you contrast these three spots, and which one kind of has the most residency in your soul, as to you look back and you're like, that taught me the most about life, and why?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're all like glorious places to go surf, and just I will say, like, as I'm truly not a maverick surfer. Like I went, when I was writing the Fear Project, I thought, you know, this is down the street from my house. A bunch of my neighbors surf it. I'm terrified of it. But I'm surfing with them out at Ocean Beach, and it seems like, you know, kind of point down the wave and go, like, you know, maybe I can do it. And I surfed out there a handful of times. But the guys who are out there all the time, like, you know, sitting deep on the bowl, and like you know, I was that was not my experience of Mavericks, but I got some waves, and that is just it's such a intense place that it's not like, for me, I realized, especially because the crowd also is it's like, the waves are so intense, and it draws you to sit deeper on this, like, just to try to get the wave, or it's not really where I wanted to be. That you know, the experience out there was just so much that I feel like it was a good experience for me, but it's not one that I wanted to go back to. Whereas, like, as Indonesia, you know, I spent most of my time in Bali, mostly because when I was going there, I sort of get my trip to Bali, and I didn't have a lot of extra money to go and like explore the outer islands and stuff and do boat trips and whatnot. So I'd kind of camp out in front of like Padang and Impossibles. We had this sweet little spot where you could, you know, a few bucks a night, like get your hammock. And so that little zone of like Padang and Impossibles, I stayed probably for, I don't know, months and months. And I just, like the people, the other surf travelers, and Impossibles is this wave where, you know, it's usually sections off where you can't really ride it all the way through, but when it works, it goes for like, God, I don't know, 500 meters or something, and there can be multiple barrels in there, and it's just, and you're racing the whole way, and you know, over blue and coral, and I mean, that I have so many good memories of that place, just friends and getting your your nasi champur between, and like, a little papaya juice like that. I love that spot. And I know it's been built up a lot now. I haven't been back in a decade plus. But I love Indonesia and hope to go there with my family now that I'm trying to get my kids to get their surf chops so we can do some trips. Puerto, I never really got it, and I think I wasn't ready for it to be like macking, like, triple overhead Puerto. It looks scary when it's like that. I surfed it, head high, double overhead, and it was really a heavy wave, and a lot of I think that I'd like to go back there and like get it, try it now when it's like good. I haven't really felt like I've seen it do its thing. So there were a handful of days where it was good and people were killing it, and I was getting just like not getting my timing right, going over the falls and getting work. So I'd like to go back and give Puerto more time.
And now, how does coming out of each of these experiences bring you a added self confidence when you're on land doing hard things? And can other surfers access that, or is that just a side effect of surfing? Is just feeling like a more confident person, I guess, in the real world?
I think it's definitely a real thing. I did a lot of when I wrote the Fear Project, a lot of that's more like the scientific side. I sort of put my journalist hat on, did all this neuroscience and psychology research. And yeah, I mean, the more confidence you have in one arena, the more confidence it does track to other areas. And you can really use it. I mean, our brains are plastic. And so, when you're in a tough moment, it's like I can go back to that feeling of riding that first Mavericks wave and just being like, what, like, how did that happen? Like, it's just so, I'd been watching this wave for years on videos and thinking, could I ever do that? And then finally doing it, I do think, there's a very sort of worldly benefit there of like, I can do hard things. I can, I check that box and I can bookmark it and get back to that place of confidence. Sorry, this bell's ringing on my computer. I don't know how to shut it off. But I think that's a real thing with any sport. It's like there's a reason, you see a lot of like athletes go into Hollywood or politics afterward and feeling like, hey, I can do this too, even though it's like a lifelong, most people, it's like you have to train for a long time. I think athletes gain this kind of visceral confidence that's very survival oriented, because we're like, when you feel strong and you feel like you can brave the elements, it gives you this sense of security, like I can sort of make it through anything. And I think that's really valuable sort of perk of just being of any sport really, where you have to work hard. But surfing, kind of like climbing a mountain or something, there's like the fact of like conquering this wild aspect of nature that a lot of other people can't, is cool, and I think really valuable. And I think there's not, and it's like, yeah, you can say, oh, well, isn't that just like ego, like being like, you sort of like, oh, I can do that. But it's I think people interpret sort of in the idea sometimes of Buddhism, where it's like you should have it doesn't mean you should have no confidence and not be sort of proud of things that you've done, or it's more like when you do those things, recognizing that you didn't do them alone. Like there's the whole universe is sort of conspiring to get you on that wave. You aren't one person just like separate from your parents and from all the things you learned in school and from your teacher. When you like ride that wave, it's a culmination of all this, love that's been and these skills that have been passed on to you. So sort of like understanding like this isn't just me, but it's also is something that I accomplished, and I think you can hold those two together in a sort of way to live in the world and be proud and be confident, but not like attached to it so much that you become sort of rigid. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. You've gone from these awesome books for adults, and you've transferred more to children's books in the past couple of years. How did that evolution take place? Did it have to do with becoming a father? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think it had 100% to do with becoming a dad and just reading all these children's books. I didn't think of it that way when I started doing it. I think I was becoming a little bit like I'd written 3 books about surfing and reflect and use, the mind and psychology and Buddhism. And I think I just needed a break from it. Like I was a little tired of hearing myself talk about it. And I started working on a kid's book when my wife was pregnant with our first son, just for him. And I was like, oh, I'm going to write this book about this little sea turtle named Kai. And I was just like blissed out doing it. I'm like, oh, this is so fun. And so I self-published that one. And I was like, I want to do more of that, So then I started getting into this graphic novel series, which originally wasn't going to be a graphic novel. I was just writing like a middle grade series because I think like having kids, it started waking me up to a lot of the things that I used to love as a kid, like that feeling of adventure and like mystery, like the Goonies or like, the Never Ending Story, like those exciting like fantasy movies and novels. And I was like, I wanted to try something new away from surfing too. So that was where the dragon story came from. And and for me, I think, it's interesting. Like I feel like surfing has in many times in my life just taken over, where I'm like, all I want to do is surf. I'm like, if I could just do this, I'd be happy. And I think sometimes, to some extent, the books I wrote were like, yeah, I wanted to write them, but I also wanted to like have a job that let me just surf for a living, like I could sort of pretend, like this is my job just because I love surfing so much. And then, it's like I live here, across the street from Ocean Beach for, 20 years or whatever. And I think there were times when it was like, it felt like I wasn't motivated to go paddle out, or I needed a break from it. And I think I've realized, even I haven't even done this consciously, but I've realized there have been times where I sort of moved away from it and then come back with a new perspective. And I think to some extent, like doing my dragon books has been that way, where I was just like, I wanted to write about something else. And then doing that for a few years, like now I'm like, yeah, well, I kind of want to get back to like a surf movie or a surf, so I think it's like anything, you want to keep it fresh and kind of find that way into beginner's mind and be appreciative for how cool it is.
The Adventures of Drip and Drop. How did you come about that book, and tell us a little bit about it?
Oh yeah, that one's coming this summer, and it's all about the water cycle. So there's these two that one, actually, we were living up in Canada at the time. During the pandemic, we got a cool opportunity to go live in Whistler, so we did like mountain lifestyle, and we're skiing and snowboarding a bunch. And I think I think because like water, experiencing water in a whole other way, right? It's like you're skating on the lakes and watching the snow come down and the rivers. And I think I was, for whatever reason, that idea came to me of these two characters who are like, don't know, they're clouds in the beginning, and they're like gonna go through this cycle, and it's sort of like a comedy. But it's about like, there's one of them is scared of change, and he doesn't want to change into like rain, and then they fall into the ocean. He doesn't want, and but it's about like embracing change, and eventually, you know, the one who's scared like is like realizes it's really fun to go through these different phases. But yeah, I think that yeah, a lot of my books with Mop and with Drip and Drop, I think, have been around fear, and learning to work with it. Probably because I've had lots of anxieties and fears, and I think it's one of the main things that holds us back from being happy and living the lives that we want to, because we're so often like get paralyzed, you know, by this feeling of like, and so I think kids too, you know, if we learn to work with that early. What I learned in the Fear Project was really like, instead, the summary after all the science and stuff was like, don't be afraid of fear, because fear is natural and fear is energy. So like, fear is actually giving you a boost. And this has helped me a ton with surfing. As I used to, I think, feel, when I felt afraid, I was like, oh no, it's going to be bad because I'm going to freeze up, or I'm going to, and instead turning and being like, no, biologically, this fear is actually giving me more energy to like paddle. And so channeling that, I mean, obviously with training, you want to do it safely and stuff, like you don't want to just throw yourself over your head, but if you do it in the right way, it's like fear is energy that can be channeled. And I kind of want to teach my kids that early. And I think it's why I like with Drip and Drop and Mop and stuff. I thought, because I think if you can learn that, to be like, recognize when you have butterflies and be like, embrace it, rather than be like, oh no, and spiral, it's infinitely helpful in sports and life, you know.
And I hear so many writers talk about the fear of writing when they sit down to a blank page. Does that still happen to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, writing is just hard, you know. It's one of those things that I think, sometimes it's a joy and you're in the flow, but a lot of times it's like, it's kind of like when you just know when you're seeing the blank page or you're starting, how much there is to go. It's like when you come home and your house is a wreck and you're like, how am I going to start this? Like, what if I just don't start? And I think that kind of happens with writer's block too, where you're just like committing to starting. So my trick with that is like, I'll go in my journal, I'll go somewhere beautiful with a like nice cup of coffee and just scribble, you know, and like sometimes just free associate, you know, like beatnik style, kind of go and see what comes. Because I think it's like movement. Another trick with fear is like, you know, I mean, meditation is one kind of stillness, but like that can sometimes help, but usually like movement helps with fear. So oftentimes, like if you're afraid to paddle out and you're just sitting on shore watching it, once you're paddling, you're actually going to start to feel better, you know. And then so like same with writing, like once you're kind of writing, even if you're not finishing the assignment, you think just the movement starts to loosen things up.
What advice do you have for young aspiring writers, maybe high school, college age students who are writing on a daily basis? What kind of words of wisdom do you have for them?
You know, of course, like keep reading a lot, you know. It's like, just getting language into your brain and read like great writers. I think for inspiration, I mean, and then just like, I think it helps to get, you know, try some journalism is a great route, because you can get some things published. And one thing that happens to a lot of writers is like they try to write their great novel, you know, first, and they don't have any foundation for, so they like maybe it's easy to get lost in a long big project. And I think it can be helpful just to take some baby steps, whatever, try to get some things, a little story published in the school newspaper, and then kind of work your way up, because it just like, you don't, maybe you want to start with a longboard. Like if you try to go, get a little chippy board and go paddle out when it's double overhead right away, it's like you might get overwhelmed. And so I think seeing an article that you've written, in print can be really a nice confidence booster. And also when you're going to apply for colleges or grad school, whether you want to do like art, like MFA or a journalism master's or a screenplay writing, just having some things that you've written is really good. But yeah, read a lot and write every day. Like I think journaling is really great way to keep the practice up too. Like, I think also that do it if you love it, because writing is a challenge. It's a challenging way to make a living. I mean, there's so many people want to write books, and it's like, I've been like fairly successful, and I'm, not rich from it. Like, it's not a good way to make money. So only do it because like you love it and it brings you joy. And because otherwise you might as well just do something more practical, that's like, but if you have the bug and you're like, I love this, man, I have a story to tell, like follow it. And it's great. It's such a wonderful tool. And the cool thing is, if developing your writing helps you with any kind of job, like, so most jobs you have to be able to communicate clearly. So yeah.
You've been around a while. You've seen how the world's changed over years and years now. We're moving into a new world of technology. We have AI coming down the pike, chatbots. You're a writer. What's your philosophy on AI chatbots? Do you use them at all to help, or are you totally like against them hardcore? How do we as sentient humans move into this new world?
It's a great question. I mean, I'm a little bit agnostic on it because I feel like I see a lot of possible benefits, and I also see the dangers. And it's like, it feels like we're moving in, it feels like something as massive, if not more, as like, the internet, where our lives are about to be changed in ways we can't even foresee. And it's, as a writer, it does, parts of it bum me out, where I think writing was already being sort of devalued with the internet, where like, there's just so much content that I think people don't realize what's good and what's not. And it's only a people of a certain like literary education who can really discern, like, is this quality or is this not? And so I think that's bound to happen even more, unfortunately, with AI. But I don't use it to write stuff. My kids are into it and they have lots of fun, like making rap battles and stuff. Like, it's an amazing technology, and I hope that we can use it to solve our big problems. It's like if we could harness AI to help us with climate change and political fighting, and it's like we could sort of use that big data to power positivity. I think it's similar to anything, I think, that's powerful. It's like if the people behind it and who are wielding it are super greedy, it's like you can want to use it for more sort of separation and more ways to sort of take away jobs. then it'll be a bummer. But I have heard a lot of AI people talk about, yeah, it is going to take away jobs, but it's going to form a lot of new ones. And it's unforeseen. I don't want to be one of those pessimists who's like, it's going to, destroy us. Because I just feel like we don't know. And I think the more that we can reflect on, like, personally, how can we improve ourselves to be in our own hearts, to be good people. Hopefully that spreads, and the people who are in charge are going to also be that way. I mean, I think humans fundamentally want to be good, and they want to do good, and so hopefully there's on balance, there's a little more good than bad that comes from it.
What's the meaning of life according to Jaimal Yogis?
I've always liked Alan Watts' answer to this question. I'm going to steal it from him, which is the meaning of life is to be alive. And it feels like a little bit of a cheat answer, but I think he's right in that we're, to really drop into our lives and really, and what that means for me is like really appreciating life. I think we're here to learn. I think life is kind of a school, and we're here to learn, and especially to learn how to treat each other well. And I think when we're really appreciative of the things around us and like drop in, it's like we have a bigger hearts to treat each other well. So yeah, I'll go with that.
Well, Jaimal, I know that you took me to school today. I'm sure you're going to be taking a lot of people to school when they hear this interview. And I am super stoked because on September 30th, you're coming here to Wrightsville Beach, and you're going to be speaking at the Flying Machine Brewery down in Wrightsville Beach next to Surf City Surf Shop. And we are ecstatic you're coming to town. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I've actually never been to Wrightsville Beach, and I really, being on the East Coast now, I've fallen in love with a lot of different spots up and down the coast, and everybody keeps telling me to come to Wilmington. So yeah, I'm fired up and hope to see some make some new friends, and see some friends who have been trying to get me to come out there. And yeah, so thanks for having me on, Sean.
Absolutely, Jaimal. And will you be speaking at this event?
I think Travis from Waterloop is going to show the Saltwater Buddha movie, and then we were just going to kind of have like a talk story kind of afterward. So yeah, Saltwater Buddha is a documentary that based on my first book that we had a lot of fun making. It's so yeah, come out and see the movie, and I'll have books if people want to get books, or just and I'll probably say a few words. Maybe we can do a little meditation or something, but yeah, it'll just be a nice night, I think.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to have you, and I hope we have waves for you also, so we can show you how beautiful our beach is. And even if there's no waves, the beach is still incredibly blue all the time, and I'm sure you're going to be super stoked.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to be there no matter what. And but yeah, let's grab a surf if we can.
Epic, Jaimal. Well, thank you so much again for your time and joining us. And this has been episode 18 of Speaking from Water. Jaimal, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'll catch you in a few weeks, or excuse me.
All right, sounds good.
Like a week and a half.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean. All right, talk soon.
Have a great trip home.
All right, you too.